So here we have the line L, which is shown on the grid, and we're asked to find an equation for this line L. So if I have a look at the grid, we have the x-axis here and the y-axis, and this is the line L, which is a diagonal straight line here. So if we're looking to find its equation, I always find it useful to basically write down the general form for an equation of a straight line, just so I can see clearly what I'm working with. So that is going to be y is equal to mx plus c. This is a general equation for a straight line. And if I have a look at this, basically we substitute in a value of x to obtain a value of y here. And we have m and c, which are fixed constants. So m in this case is going to be the gradient of this straight line graph. That's what this constant is going to be. And we can just substitute m in as whatever we calculate the gradient to be. And then we have this value. And then c here is going to be another constant, but this constant is going to be equal to the y-intercept of the graph. Now we can see this because when we have the y-intercept, the x value is going to be 0 when we're working with the y-axis. So this value here is going to be 0. If x is 0, mx is also 0. So y is equal to c. So the y-intercept is going to be this value of c. So I can then use this information to calculate and work out the equation of the graph. So if I start by working out the gradient, so m, we calculate the gradient by finding the change in y, so delta y, over the change in x for this straight line graph. Now I can do this by drawing out a triangle like so. So it can be any size, just going between 2 points on the line, and it's a right angle triangle like this. So now I can look for the change of y and the change in x. So if we start with x, we start with x is 0, and I'm going up here along this bottom line of the triangle, the horizontal line, to where x equals 2. So this is a change in x of 2, so 2 squares. And similarly for y, we start at -6, and we're going to go up 6 squares to 0, so there's a change of 6 squares. And then I can write this out, so the change in y is 6 over the change in x, which is 2, and that gives me an answer of 3 for the gradient. So if I substitute this back into the equation, we have y is equal to 3x plus some value of c. Now there's a couple of different ways we could work with this. We could substitute in a value of x and y that's on the line, so a coordinate, and we could work out the c by just rearranging that. Or we can simply look at the graph and find the y-intercept, so the c value here. So the y-intercept is when x is equal to 0 on this line here on the y-axis, where that meets the line L, which is here at -6. So c is going to be equal to -6. And then we can simply substitute that in to get our final answer. So y is equal to 3x, and we need to make sure we have this negative sign, -6. And that brings us to the correct final answer for the equation for this line. Now as for how the marks are awarded here, we would get the first mark for basically working out this gradient that we did of 3. And then another mark for writing down this equation here. So just stating that we know that y is equal to 3x plus this value of c that we're then going to work out. And then the final mark was for this correct final answer here. There are a couple of different ways you can go about getting the marks. It just depends which order you've calculated things in and how you've used these values, and maybe you substituted in values to find c, or maybe you just read it off as the y-intercept.